planning meetings for this term of the council of 5 years. Looks as though we've got quite a full house here. So, but please make sure all your phones are off, your mobile phones anyway, before we start any procedures. And if you'll bear with me as your chairman, I would like to say a few thank yous. As I say, it's been 5 years. I've chaired this committee now for 5 years, well, a bit beyond that actually, and vice chair before that. We've made, I don't usually make notes, but I had to do this morning. We have had many challenging discussions to make over the years, some good and some bad. Policies change. We've allowed public speaking, which is new in this last term, I believe. That does help with procedures. And we've had pre-app advice, where an awful lot of applicants have benefited from doing that. And we are live streaming, and not all authorities do live streaming, and so with the live streaming we very rarely see the press in the chamber anymore. Not that they don't put it into the paper. We've also got the delegation panel with myself, the vice chair, and opposition spokesman Councillor Roger Harris, and where we go out and meet with the applicants if there's an objection to that application, and we speak with them and the objector, and usually come to some agreement and solve the problems. If we can't, it comes back to committee. So that does help to speed it up through the works of getting a decision made. And we do that practically every week, have a delegation panel, apart from the week that we're doing site visits as of yesterday, and the planning committee the following day as today. With the panel, that enables us to do all those sorts of things, and it helps with, we take an officer, or they take us out actually, and so we know where we're going with all of that. I have had great admiration for our planning officers. They've been a tower of strength for all of us, and very tolerant, very helpful, and very courteous and polite. I can't praise them enough. We have had some new positions in the planning office, not to mention what you could call a new kid on the block, which is a very young planning officer, Mark Hand up there, which is, he's very approachable and does very well with all members. And he comes on site visits and gets himself very involved, which is good. He's blushing now, I think. All the team in planning, I do thank you, and I do appreciate all the support I've had from all of the members, especially the committee, where we are the largest committee in the authority of 16 members. And because it's a large committee, you think, well, we'll have a few less members on occasions, but on the whole, we've had a very, very good attendance record, which does help with applications and the continuity for making the decision that might have to come back. So then the applicants have confidence that it's the same people helping making the decision. Some of us hopefully will be fortunate to return next month. I believe there's something going on next Thursday. And I believe that we are setting a good example to other authorities with all that we do in Monmouthshire, and hope that they will follow our lead in lots of things. But there's also one person that isn't here today that is almost the unsung hero, and that's Richard. He has been marvellous as our member from the Democratic Services doing the minutes. He does everything perfectly, quiet, the water's done, everything. And also we've got Paula today, not that she's any slacker at all. She keeps us in order as well. And I said slacker. She works very hard as well, but Richard has obviously set an example for her to follow. And Rob, at the end, he keeps us on the straight and narrow with any legal matters, and we know he is a debt of gratitude to Rob, and my vice chair and spokesperson of the opposition, Roger and Peter Clark. So I must say I've enjoyed the last 5 years being your chair, and hope it'll continue if we're all lucky enough to get back next time. Anyway, now we'll go on with the procedure of the meeting of today. So apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies this afternoon from County Councillors David Dovey, Phil Murphy, Dave Evans and Pauline Watts. Thank you very much, Paula. Declarations of interest, please. None whatsoever? Right, that makes a change. Thank you very much. So we'll go on to confirm the minutes of the last meeting.
Right, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11.
Chairman.
Sorry,
Yep.
Councillor Strong?
Yes, so on page 11, the Maryport Street decision last time. Bullet point 7 says that I said if the application is agreed today, it will give the inspector of the inquiry permission to agree to the 2 dwellings. They were the 2 dwellings that were initially refused by this committee, but the item we discussed at the last meeting was on the same footprint. There was a long discussion, and really I asked as well, which isn't mentioned on this, I asked for it to be deferred until the appeal had been considered by the inspector. I just wondered whether that minute could be slightly amended to the effect that it would be preferable to defer consideration of this application until the inspector has determined the appeal against refusal of the earlier application. I don't know whether that's possible, but I would like that to be done.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. I'll ask for a comment. Right, that's noted. Okay, Councillor Strong, you're happy with that amendment?
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. And page 12. Due to that amendment, do you wish that I sign these at the end of the meeting as a true record?
Move, Madam Chairman.
Right, could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Thank you all very much. Now, we're not going to take the applications as set down on the agenda. The first one we shall take will be, application on page 65 to 74. This is application 00041 at Wybridge Street in Monmouth. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Let's go to the slide. Right, okay. Okay, that's the site. Sorry, it's a bit blurred, that picture. This application proposes a 39-space car park, public car park on land adjacent to Wybridge Street. So that's looking back with the public school, Monmouth School behind you, and looking towards the site, and the A40 over on the right-hand side, looking over towards Wisham, or Hadnot Road. The site currently accommodates 8 mature trees, 2 of which would be felled to accommodate the car park, which we had a look at on the site yesterday, one of which looks diseased actually, but there would be 3 replacement trees planted, so actually be a net gain of trees on the site. The parking spaces are to be grasscrete, and the area would be planted with additional native species, not just trees, to soften the development. And what are called rain gardens would be introduced to increase more species diversity on the site and provide habitat for pollinators. So just have a quick look through the slide. So that's a slightly clearer photo, actually. And that shows the access into the site off Wybridge Street, which is a one-way system off the lights. So the in lane would be nearer the junction, and then the out exit lane would be further away from the junction to make it safer, and would be orientated so that obviously you have to go right up towards the to St James's Street there. You can see the main car park there would be in chevron style parking with 39 spaces. There'll be orientation one direction only, in a circular direction around the central aisle there. That's where the planting and suds and rain gardens would be in amongst there. There'd be, just have a look at the next plan. That shows where 2 of the trees are to be taken out. If you bear with me. Tree there and here to accommodate the in-out arrangement. Those have been okayed by our tree officer. And then that shows a section through it. And then that shows the drainage and ducting. and this curbing arrangement. In terms of lighting, it's proposed to provide some bollards in amongst the existing trees near the access and egress, and then there'd be 4 metre higher standards in amongst the sort of more central part of the parking area to provide illumination down onto the parking spaces and circulation spaces, but they'd be no more than 4 metres high, which is relatively low, and painted matte black. So in terms of the evaluation of the application, there's a number of different issues. There's been a response from NRW that they'd require a flood consequences assessment given that the application is in floodplain. But it is defended floodplain, it's zone C1, not C2, which is undefended. And car parks are acknowledged as being less vulnerable development in TAN 15. NRW have requested an FCA, as said. However, LDP policy SD3 is the locally relevant policy in relation to flood risk. And this was accepted by, obviously, the LDP Inspectorate examination. So in terms of applying that criterion, we consider that the policy, the proposal complies with that policy SD3. And despite the request for information NRW, we don't feel an FCA is needed in this instance because of the design of the proposal, its position in a defended floodplain, and the inclusion of sustainable urban drainage systems throughout the development, which will negate the need for, which wouldn't impact on flooding elsewhere in the area, so that the site looks after its own drainage requirements. So in that respect, the application is compliant with policy SD3 and is considered to be acceptable in terms of flooding information, even in the absence of an FCA. In terms of the impact on the conservation area, it is situated in a prominent location, and it sits within the conservation area and forms an open area that is highly visible at the junction of the A40. However, applying the Council's green infrastructure policy has been very important in ensuring that the site is developed in a sensitive way, and the proposal has been revised during the course of the application to retain the most important mature trees that are intrinsic to the quality of the space, and the rain gardens that form the central landscaping space will accommodate further planting, including tree planting. The engineered infrastructure has been kept to a minimum, with grasscrete used as the main surfacing material and tarmac being used primarily on just the footpaths, the new footpaths. The lighting infrastructure proposed has been subject to considerable negotiation, with, as said, 3 4-metre high lighting columns finished in matte black now proposed, which is an appropriate arrangement for this conservation area and does not over-dominate the site. In addition, lighting bollards are to be used in the open spaces where the trees are located. In terms of highway impact, that's been assessed by our own highway officers, as well as consulting the Trunk Roads Agency. And from a highway safety perspective, the development is considered acceptable in highway terms. And importantly, the proposed development will provide car parking at the northern end of Monmouth Town, and there have been numerous letters of support from local businesses as well as the Chamber of Commerce stating that this will ease traffic parking for visitors that wish to access that part of Monmouth. The proposal is sensitively designed and therefore does not undermine key features that include attraction for tourists and visitors to the town centre. So having taken all of those issues into account, we would recommend approval subject to the conditions listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that detailed report. I do believe we have a speaker for the it's Chairman of Monmouth and District Chamber of Trade and Commerce. Could you please state your name, and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
David Cummings, Chairman of Monmouth and District Chamber of Trade and Commerce. I would like to thank the committee for giving me the chance on behalf of the Chamber to give a summary of the reasons for our wholehearted support for this planning application. I have personally lobbied MCC for over a decade for a car park in this location, and a predecessor as chairman of Monmouth Chamber has indicated to me that this car park was first proposed in the mid-1980s. The Chamber was sympathetic to the concerns of the residents of Granville Street when in the original plans prior to 2016, both the entrance and exit to the car park would have been down this narrow road. We suggested an alternative entrance to the car park on land owned by Monmouthshire Housing Association on St James Street, adjacent to the Queen's Head. However, despite MCC Estates and Highways entering a dialogue with MHA, the crumbling, partly concrete block lean-to and Grade 2 listed structure attached to the Queen's Head, which needed to be demolished to create an entrance, proved a stumbling block for an entrance from St James Street. I've checked with a firm of air quality consultants, and the number of traffic movements at the new car park is so low that its effect on the area on air quality is not measurable. Of course, having an entrance only accessible from the A40 is not ideal, as it cannot be accessed from the town. But we believe that MCC officers have used their best efforts to find alternatives, and all have proven not viable. What is evident to every person arriving at the Shire Hall end of town by car is that parking demand, especially at peak times, exceeds the supply of both off and on-street car parking. The Glendower Street car park is oversubscribed and currently accommodates 33 residents with parking permits. There has been a tendency for some users, despite the high cost, to feed the meter all day, and we are pleased that when new machines are installed, the maximum stay will be 4 hours with no return within 2, permitting several users to use each car parking space each day. This new 39-space long-stay car park goes some way to improving the town's car park offering and helps provide shoppers with more spaces and assists with business sustainability. This car park forms the final part in a 3-part initiative by the Chamber of lobbying the County Council for improved infrastructure. The Premier Inn and Rockfield car parks are now built and are having a very beneficial effect on the businesses at the Mono Bridge end of town. The Wybridge Street car park helps balance the top and bottom of town equation. The Chamber is pleased that the appropriate lighting has been designed into this application rather than adjusted as in the Rockfield Road car park, where building work was held up. We are therefore confident that this car park can be completed at the latest by 1st of September 2017 if approved today. Many thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Cummins. Well, most of the committee were there yesterday, I believe, at the site visit. County Councillor Alan Wintle, is this your ward? Well, would you like to comment first then, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, as David said, this car park's been a long time coming. It was identified, well, before I was on the council even, as an area, but for some peculiar reason it was held up. I don't believe it does get a bit wet at the bottom end of the car park when the flood defences come into operation. But apart from that, I don't think there's any other problems there. I'm not too happy about the entrance, which is coming off Wybridge Street and off the dual carriageway, because that means if you don't know the area, you're not going to be able to use it. I would have thought it would have been easier coming in from that bottom end, but for some peculiar reason, the consultants didn't think that was a viable route. But apart from that, any car park is better than no car park. So I'm afraid. Well, there's one other thing. I would hope that the egress from the car park, there would be sufficient warnings there to stop people turning left back down onto the dual carriageway. I would have preferred to seen a ridge coming out into the road to make sure that the people turn right, because there have been a couple of fatalities when people have come down that road, even though it was a no entry. So we have to, well, I would like to see some things put in place to help remind people to turn right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. I should imagine by now you're quite an authority on car parking. My comment would have been with the lighting. I do prefer to see it low-level lighting, and I dare say Mark could give us an answer on this. A lot of the lighting would come from a spill of the dual carriageway as well to light it slightly, would it? There?
I would expect that to be the case, Madam Chairman. Yes, there will be a lot of light cast off the A40. I think it will be a well-illuminated area, come what may, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, right. Thank you for that, Mark. Anybody else now wish to comment? Councillor Hayward at the back.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Windle and I always have a big argument. I actually believe it's in my ward, if you look at the boundary.
No, boys, play nicely.
But we both agree that the car park is necessary. The town has been lobbying for this for years and years, and the car park is absolutely necessary to keep the top of the town, the vitality in the top of the town. I'm a little bit disappointed that the number of cars in the car park is only 39. The original plans, when submitted, had over 60 parking places, but I understand the officers have had problems with access and egress, with the right of way into the back of a house, with the provision of trees, etc. But the truth of the matter is that, in fact, more car parking space than this is necessary. This will just help the problem. I'm also disappointed with the access off Whitebridge Street because, as people have pointed out, it will actually only suit the people in Wisham who come across the bridge. That's the first access into town, and they will use the car park. If people come from Osbaston or Dixon, then to access the car park, they've got to go right down to the bottom of the town, back on the dual carriageway and come up, which of course they're never going to do. And people coming from the south along the dual carriageway will see the main car parks at the cattle market and Waitrose, and will go in there rather than take a chance and come up on a 39 space car park, which, if it's full, they have no other choice but to go all the way up the Dixon roundabout, back down to the tunnels, up over the bridge, and into the car parks at the bottom. So I think it'll only be used by Wisham, or tongue-in-cheek by the school children of the haberdashers who will feed the meters whether they've got new equipment or not. So I think I fully support the application. I'm just a little bit disappointed that it's not bigger. I'm just a little bit disappointed with the access, but it's vital for the town, and it's imperative that we pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Anybody else wish to comment? No, nobody? Do you wish to move, Councillor Wintle?
Yes, I'll move acceptance.
And I'll second, Chair.
Right, thank you. We've got a proposal of approval and seconded. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's, I was going to say unanimous, it's not. So 11-4, Chairman.
And 11 for and
Against.
1 against.
The application's approved.
Right, thank you very much, Rob. We now go to application on page 81 to 92, 4.4 on the list, and that is application 01310, and this is at Llanfair Kilgedin. Thank you. Right, Andrew, you're presenting this?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a full application in respect of a parcel of land that is approximately a third of a mile just outside the village of Llanfair Kilgedin. Just quickly run through the photographs. This is the junction immediately opposite the access that members will have seen yesterday looking back towards the village. If we can just sort of skip through the photographs. This is a view from just inside the access, looking slightly to your left through the site. And again, this is just inside the access, looking to the right, and then there are some wider shots as well from the western boundary of the site at a distance, as well as the eastern boundary as well on the next slide. So, planning permission is sought to change the use of part of the land, approximately 0.95 hectares, to allow for the siting of 6 units of tourist accommodation. These would be tented canvas units that would be mounted on top of hay trailers. With regards to sort of size, they would measure approximately 9 by 5 metres, standing 4.25 metres above ground. The site would be accessed via an existing site entrance along the sort of northwesterly boundary. This would require some improvement works to bring visibility displays up to standard, and the parking area would be just to the southeast of that, an enclosed area. If Phil can point that, yeah. So this is, yeah, the darker.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So that would be the parking area. So permission is sought for the siting of units for 10 months of the year. The site would be closed during the months of January and February. During this time, the hay trailers would be stored in the Grasscrete area, but the actual accommodation would be taken off-site for cleaning and maintenance purposes because they are canvas tents. So as you can see, a large portion of the site along sort of the western edge would be left for agriculture. In the southeast and southwestern corners, this would be managed as a hay meadow, and sort of splintering the site where there would be banks of 3 of the units would be planted up as a heritage orchard. And along the southern boundary, you'll note there's also a proposal to create a new pond area. So the plans have been subject to some discussions and alterations with officers. This has seen a touring caravan removed from the north of the site, which would have been in the car park area. That's been removed in its entirety. And indeed, in that area, the Grasscrete area has also been reduced in scale. There would be no manager's accommodation on site. The applicants who will be running the site have a property close by at Llanfair Cross, so they would be on hand during the day for sort of day-to-day greeting and general site management purposes. So from an officer's assessment point of view, I think key to it is our strategic policy for visitor economy, which notes that proposals that provide and or enhance sustainable forms of tourism will be permitted subject to detailed planning considerations. And I think in this instance, officers are happy that this does qualify as a sustainable, quote-unquote, glamping form of accommodation. In terms of those those material considerations, from a visual impact point of view, they have carried out further landscape visual impact assessment at the request of our landscape officer. The main area of concern, therefore, MCC's landscape officer, was the Grasscrete parking area at the top. But officers are of the view that that area is already enclosed with mature vegetation, and that would be supplemented with further planting as well. From a highways point of view, I say the point of access is an existing point of access. It would be required to be improved, but highways are happy with that subject to condition to secure that improvement, and also happy that the number of units is not such that it would put undue pressure on the highway network. From a biodiversity point of view, again, further ecological survey has been done to cover the entire site, and subject to enhancement conditions, etc. Our biodiversity officers are satisfied with the scheme. So, in conclusion, subject to planning conditions that would include a full foul drainage scheme, details of all hard and soft landscaping, as well as securing the implementation of an improved access, officers present the application to you with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much for that detailed report again, Andrew. I believe we have a member from Llanova Community Council who wishes to speak. Please state your name and you'll have 4 minutes. Okay, thank you.
I'm Graham Thomas, Chairman of Llanova Community Council. I'm representing not only the Community Council, but the majority of households in this particular ward, of which I'm also the councillor. And I sympathise with the council itself, or the officers, that you have to wade with over 200 pages of objections and documentation before we can arrive at your agreement. I would like to comment on the fact that I think you're a bit premature in arriving at this application, because there are two important documents which are still in the process of being provided, which you haven't got, in which to provide your recommendation for approval or not. I refer to, first of all, that is referred quite extensively in all the objections, that an appraisal being funded by the Assembly on the potential and risks of flooding in the village. I myself have had water come into my own premises, and in fact this actually also encompasses the actual site of which you're being looked at. So you've had some comments made in the visual assessment and other things by other people, but I feel as you should wait for a professional assessment of the risks that are involved in this. Also, you would be aware that several weeks ago you were provided with a draft supplementary planning guide on glamping, because on contact with your tourist office, whilst we accept that tourism is very, very essential to the well-being of Monmouthshire, there is no statistical evidence at the moment to demonstrate the need for additional glamping sites in Monmouthshire. There are 14 sites in existence at the moment, and perhaps with consultation that will provide the need and when the additional sites are required. So until this documentation has been provided, I feel you cannot arrive at a measured view of this application. If I go on to the existing application as it stands, I think you've just confirmed the original application was for change of use, but now I'm to believe is specifically for the car park and 6 units only. And if that is true, if I can refer to what is provided, you've been given some photos of the particular unit that will be provided. What I would like to draw attention to, in fact, though, is that it is mentioned as large, but in fact it is 5 metres wide, 9 metres long, 4.25 metres high, which has a larger footprint than a 10-berth static caravan is used for normal holiday accommodation. It is a very, very large unit. So to suggest that it is visually unobtrusive, as has been said, is perhaps stretching it a bit, particularly as the application asks for it to be there for 10 months of the year. You were fortunate when you went yesterday to have you only went adjoined to the site and you had vegetation and leaf. But don't forget, unfortunately in the UK, we have deciduous trees, we have autumn. So as soon as the leaves disappear, all surrounding properties can see these particular units. They have a gravel in front of them, and as will be evidenced at a later date from the conditions application, there will be a drainage for fowl and other things there. Because of the geography, this will be, I assume, at the bottom of the site. There's no evidence at the moment provided for the hard standing that will have to be provided to access this for maintenance of the services. Okay, so all I can suggest then that if you seriously consider deferring this application until a later date, till you've got full information in front of you in which you can make a considered opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. I believe there was somebody else wishing to speak from the Community Council, but we had no names submitted. So is there anybody else from the Community Council wishing to speak?
I think you feel that Sarah, the existing county councillor, wanted to speak, but unfortunately...
Yeah, she's away at the moment. Yes. Yeah, but there is no one else then to speak locally. Right, so the applicant has a right of reply now if he wishes to take the stand, please. Thank you. Could you please state your name, and you also have 4 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Fenner. My partner Mark and I have proposed a small and ecologically sensitive development of just 6 tents. We have extensive experience of tourism, winning numerous awards over the years, including being the best in continent of Africa for 2 years running, and we are the featured KLM Airlines tours provider. I myself am an elected fellow of the Institute of Travel and Tourism. Therefore, before making this application, we carried out extensive research, and this showed us that there is a growing demand in Monmouthshire for all year round high-value sustainable tourism. We would accommodate small numbers of high-value tourists who would spend money in local businesses such as the farm shop outside the village, the Fox Hunter pub at Nanterderry and the Hummingbird Cafe in Llanover. To set up and manage the proposed business, as mentioned, we now live locally at Llanfair Cross. We would look to source all our supplies locally and employ local people if we create any future jobs. This is the biggest single investment that Mark and I have made in over 15 years in tourism. So to ensure everything was done properly, we engaged a professional planning consultant and worked with them to ensure that our proposal meets all of the current planning policies. We worked extensively with Councillor Sarah Jones and took on board input from local residents to amend our policy. It is also worth noting that we worked extensively with Assembly Member Nick Ramsey. His input and advice over many meetings with him have helped us develop this proposal to the point where Mr Ramsey felt able to withdraw his online comments regarding our application. I feel it's also worth noting the following points. Firstly, the site is not inside Welsh Water or the County Council's flood risk area. Secondly, the Highways Department have said that our proposal, and I'll quote from them, will enhance the safety of vehicles using the adjacent County Class 111 highway. Thirdly, we are proposing to carry out extensive planting on the land, including a heritage orchard and many areas of flower meadows. We've worked very closely with David Lloyd, the owner of Upper Pentwyn Farm, who is our nearest neighbour, and with him we plan to remove fences so that our own guests and the public can access the land and use the footpath to Nanterderry. Fourthly, during our 2-month close period, we will remove each tent from the land to send them for re-waterproofing, the agricultural trailers being moved to the Grasscrete area. And finally, we are proposing a low-impact sustainable development that will enhance native plants, protect wildlife habitats, and we are working closely with the Wildlife Trust and Monmouthshire Meadows Conservation Group to achieve this. Dr Stephanie Tyler, the chairman of Monmouthshire Meadows Conservation Group, visited us on site, and she said, and again I quote, "I feel that the glamping proposal will be better for wildlife conservation than the land going to a farmer." Llanover Council has raised some points, and I'll look at these in turn. Yes, there are other tourism developments in the area. We are each unique and each cater for our own specific market. We have extensively researched the potential of this site, and our proposal will complement and not compete with other tourism sites in the area. Regarding light pollution, we have joined the Brecon Beacons National Park training programme to be ambassador businesses for their Dark Skies scheme. There will be a strict curfew at 20 to 30 hours for noise. There will be no movements of guests' cars on site. Each guest will park in the parking area and walk to the units. Where possible, all food waste will be composted, and guests will be encouraged, as is common with glamping, to remove their own hard waste. Any left will be recycled using local facilities. Sewage will be dealt with via an activated sludge sewage treatment unit. This unit is approved by the Environment Agency and certified by British Water, and this only requires emptying once a year. There are existing power lines on the site. Our pond will greatly enhance amphibians, and we are not removing any hedging. We just need to translocate a very small section of hedging in order to make the highway safer. So finally, although I am by no means an expert in planning policy, I am aware that the LPA have a new emerging planning policy guidance on sustainable tourism, of which we have been informed that our amended proposal is compliant with. We would therefore kindly ask that the committee supports our application for an environmentally and economically sustainable tourism development, and like the Planning Officer Andrew Jones has said, would recommend a grant of planning consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. As stated, the local member, Councillor Sarah Jones, is unable to be here today. She's had pressing business in London due to the fact as well that we've had to move, which we generally have a planning meeting the first Tuesday of the month, but we brought it forward, which did, it seems, raise a few concerns with local people, but it was unavoidable because of the election next week. So anybody else now wish to comment that was at the site yesterday, please? Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So somebody was on the phone to me last night and they're raising one or two points which I'd like clarified if possible. First of all, on the original drawings, Andrew, I gather the car parking could have accommodated 66 cars. Is that still the case?
The car park in area, the grass pit, has been reduced now. I think it totals 1,000 square metres, but that would, it's not just the parking. Obviously, it's when the trailers are coming into a site, they need to be turned to be stored. So, mindful of that function of it as well. It's not just a car park. It's felt that the area is, from an officer's point of view, it's not excessive.
Oh, okay. Lighting. We don't see any detail on the drawings about lighting provision.
No lighting is proposed on the submitted detail. At the request of our ecology officer, a condition would be imposed to control any form of external lighting. So that would, consider not only biodiversity but local residential amenity and certainly visual impact during hours of darkness. So that would be controlled through planning condition.
And thirdly, the caravan site at Chambridge has opening months from April till October. It's thought that this is of a similar nature as a business and that this should have a similar opening times.
Well, it's for members to consider if they feel the season is excessive. As was referenced in the presentation, the emerging supplementary planning guidance on sustainable tourism does state that if it's felt that the visual impact is such that sites can be open longer, then that is potentially acceptable. In this case, it's felt that the siting of these units for 10 months wouldn't cause unacceptable wider views. And the main issue would be the Grasscrete area, which would be obviously in situ permanently and is already screened and would be screened further. So for that reason, it's considered the 10-month season acceptable.
And are you happy that we would make a decision this afternoon without having received the flood report?
Well, with regards to flooding, the site does sit approximately 0.3 mile outside of any the TAN 15 flood zones. And it's also worth noting that no non-porous surfaces are proposed. There's a Grasscrete area to the north, and also the small gravel surfaces as well are porous and permeable. Environmental Health have requested a condition for a full, thorough foul drainage scheme to be considered, and that's what we recommend in that we're happy that it can be controlled through that method.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I'll take Councillor Ralph Chapman first, please, and then Councillor Roger Harris afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The times that this site will be open. I'm a caravanner, I go all year round, and many people go caravanning. Even when I had a trailer tent, I was going all year round. I think that the tourism is all year round now, and not only in Monmouthshire, all over Wales. So I've got no problem with the opening. The only problem I had, and that was answered yesterday, was about waste disposal, having the reed beds, because in my caravan we use chemicals. I've been assured by the applicant that no chemicals will be used in this disposal. So I'm quite happy. I think it's a great asset, and we should support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Roger Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two questions. First of all, have the units got electrical hookups like occur on most caravan sites for internal lighting, etc., and boiling up of kettles, etc.? And secondly, it's been mentioned that the site, when the leaves are off the trees, will be in view of houses. How far away are the nearest houses, please?
Yeah, just to go on that point first. The nearest house, I believe, is approximately 35 metres away. That's at St Mary's Hill. 65 metres away, on the opposite side of the carriageway at St Mary's Hill. So that would be the nearest residential property. With regards to lighting, etc., it's my understanding that, they would have the benefit of those facilities.
Is that okay for you, Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Ralph has proposed. I'm happy to second.
Oh, Councillor Hayward at the back there, you wish to comment, please?
Yes, Chair. I only wish to comment to say that sustainable tourism in the countryside is good for the county. I support this application. We know that it's always going to upset somebody because there is something else in the countryside. Our countryside is such a nice place, but I think we should be helping people to enjoy our countryside as well. I don't think the units are excessive, and I fully support this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Debbie Blakeborough.
Just to echo some of the comments, really. My ward, we have Lanishan, we have the yurts there, and actually it benefits the local community. I think they were concerned when it was first put in place, but actually everybody, as they celebrates it and does benefit from that. I suppose for me, it's just the pre-commencement conditions, just to ask the question, who will monitor and enforce those and make sure those are as they should be before work starts?
Yeah, that would be our enforcement monitoring officer, that's Helen Etherington, so it would be her role to ensure that those conditions are fully satisfied before the site is up and running.
And would the Community Council have sight of that as well?
Well, when we receive the applications in turn to discharge the conditions, then there's absolutely no reason why we can't notify Community Councils as well at the same time. That would be sensible.
Councillor Jim Higginson, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Please remind me, is there a limit on the car parking spaces of car parking, the numbers of cars to be parked on that particular area? Only what comes to mind is, and I've seen it elsewhere, you get one small tent and about 4 cars there. It's happened sometimes, and I'm just wondering, are you going to put a limit on the car parking arrangement?
I'm not sure whether in a sort of practical enforceable sense that would be possible really to enforce the number of cars that were parked there. Like I said, it's the anticipated car trips are not considered to be excessive, and obviously during the winter months when it was closed, the trailers would be there, which would sort of preclude people from using it. So I think, from an enforcement point of view, it would be difficult to say only X number of cars should be parked there.
Anybody else wish to comment now? Oh, excuse me. No? Right, I believe Councillor Chapman, you moved approval.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
And you have a seconder? Councillor Roger Harris. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's 10-4, Chairman.
I'm going to abstain. Thank
And
you.
there are 2 abstentions, so the application is moved for approval.
Right, thank you very much for your point on that, Robert. We now go to application on page 1364. This is 01290, and this is in Chepstow. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. This application's on page 13 of the agenda, and it relates to the Maybe Bridge site in Chepstow. So it's this area of land outlined in yellow. It's a bit blurry on that photo, unfortunately, this aerial photo. But you can see it's these really significant industrial units, this whole site. Got 4 old slipways here, which I'll talk about in a minute, next to the River Wye. This is the A48 and the railway overbridges. Castle's over here, and Chepstow Town Centre. And this white bit here is nearby Tesco's, and this is the railway station. So the application, Chair, is for outline planning permission with all matters reserved apart from the access into the site, and it's to redevelop this approximately 20 hectare brownfield site, very centrally located in Chepstow, for primarily residential uses, either use class C3, which is a standard house, or some older people's accommodation, so use class C2. Associated employment uses, so it'd be 6,500 square metres of flexible employment space, plus you've got Brunel House, which is a building went into yesterday, and that's a grade 2 listed structure. and associated open spaces, green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, and play spaces, which I'll come to in more detail. It's an allocated site in our local development plan under policy SAH3. It's allocated for a mixed use of residential and employment, 3 hectares of employment use is suggested in the policy, and 350 dwellings. Just to clarify, that wasn't to cap the number of dwellings. That was looking at how many homes may come forward during the LDP period, which is up to 2021. It was actually considered by the LDP inspector in highways terms, looked at whether the site had capacity to 450 to 500, which it was concluded it did have. So as I mentioned, they're the key features of the site, being that close to Chepstow town centre. In addition to Brunel House, which is Grade 2 listed, the railway overbridge here at the entrance into the site is also Grade 2 listed. These slipways are not listed, but they are recognised as being of national importance. And as we heard yesterday, there's an awful lot of history on the site in terms of shipbuilding and also bridge building. The slipways having pre-war and war importance in terms of shipbuilding and that side of things. In terms of the other bits on the surroundings, the River Wye, as you're probably aware, is a a special area of conservation, a SAC, a European designation. It's also a site of special scientific interest, SSSI, and a Ramsar site. So there's some pretty significant ecological considerations. The areas right on the banks of the river, as you can see, and the River Wye at this stage is tidal, so we have to consider flooding. And then just to give you a bearings, this is England over here. So as I mentioned, the LDP allocation, it talks about 3 hectares for employment and 350 dwellings. The application we're considering is for up to 450 dwellings due to a condition we're recommending, and they're proposing 6,500 square metres of flexible employment space. So we're satisfied that gives us the equivalent in terms of job creation as an acceptable mix in planning terms. The application started its life as being for up to 600 units. So again, I'll touch on this when we talk about conditions later if there's questions. But we're now looking at a cap at 450 dwellings. If the reserve matters come in for more than 450, there'll be a requirement for the applicant to come back with additional information on traffic flows, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also additional information on viability, which I'll talk about later. One of the main reasons that the number of dwellings was reduced was a decision based partly on construction issues and partly on the heritage importance of these slipways. Initially, there proposed to be some apartment blocks in between, which as an urban design feature would have been fantastic, but for various other reasons is no longer able to happen. So that took a fairly high density part of the development out of the equation. I'll just run through a few photos for you to familiarise yourselves. So that's Brunel House, which is a Grade 2 listed building, is currently and will continue to be commercial use, office use in there. Some other shots of buildings on the site and some of the gantries. Those gantries have actually since been removed, and the buildings and the roofs have been removed, but the remainder of the buildings are still there, as we saw yesterday. And as was explained yesterday, they've been fully recorded in terms of their not aesthetic importance, but their historic importance to the area, with some extremely significant records being kept and will be suitably stored and made accessible. Down towards the riverbank, you've got this intertidal area and some kind of salt marsh and important grassland areas for ecology. So again, as you're familiar, the river being tidal doesn't perhaps always look the prettiest in a postcard sense, but is extremely ecologically important. And well, maybe beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I find it really interesting with the tidal range and the way it goes up and down. This here is one of the slipways, one of the 4. There were 6 originally. 2 were lost, 4 remain, and 1 will be brought back as a real heritage feature, and the other 4 will be retained, but in a kind of a lower key sense. This is a view of part of the site. This is actually looking from under the railway bridge and the road bridge into the Osborne site. So again, things have moved on since this photo was taken. This building's been demolished, and the development of the Osborne site's now cracking on at a decent pace. It's a slightly blurry, I'm afraid, but this is Brunel House on the right, and the entrance into the site, which I'll come back to in a moment, and another image of one of the other slipways. And then the site also includes an existing business, which is a skip hire business, and Forest Sands, which are around towards that northern area. So there's 4 key issues that I'll go through, Chair. Probably spend more time on the traffic and access and air quality topic, but also look at design and layout, ecology and flood risk, and then viability. So in terms of traffic and access, this is a master plan overview for the site. So as I mentioned, it is an outline application, but access is before us now for consideration. And the main access into the site is here under the railway bridge, up Station Road, alongside Tesco's. And this here is the A48, which is a trunk road. There's also a secondary vehicular access proposed, which runs through here under the railway bridge and the road bridge to the Osborne site. And you might recall that when you dealt with the Osborne site several years ago, provision was put in and is tied into a legal agreement for that access road to go in and up to the boundary. And the applicants confirmed they've got the necessary rights and permissions and ownerships to make the link up to the other side. It is worth noting that the traffic flow information has been based solely on this one access, but the applicants have agreed to provide this, and it's something that we, as planning and highways officers, very much welcome in terms of appropriate connectivity through into Chepstow, into the town, make it a much better way to get linkages in. Maybe an option in the future for a bus route through into the site, but certainly much better for pedestrians and local residents. There would also be 2 pedestrian points of access to the south of the site. There's an existing underbridge beneath the railway up to the Garden City, which will be retained and opened up, so residents can go through either way. So there's some play facilities in this area, some sports facilities and community facilities, and then also it opens up the site to the existing population of the Garden City to come down. And then there's also a pedestrian route up into Thornwell through this quarry area, which I'll talk about in a minute. And there's enhancements proposed to that to make that safe and open that up. And then again, something I'll talk about later on is the new riverfront footpath, which is proposed will become part of the Wales Coastal Path, which is a fantastic benefit to Chepstow. In terms of the access, though, this has probably been the most controversial or publicly sensitive part of the scheme, so we'll spend a bit more time on this. This is the Station Road approach, which will be the main entrance into the site. Brunel House is just off the photo on your right. This one here is the pedestrian access into Garden Village. So what's proposed with the Station Road entrance is for the road to be lowered by approximately a metre, and that will allow 2 cars to pass side by side and a pedestrian footpath to be provided. And it also allows, more importantly, the reason for the lowering is for the large HGVs to access the site. They would, by necessity, be in the centre of the road, but for general use it will be 2-way traffic. So that lowering the road is significant both in highways terms of securing good access into the site, but it also has some very significant implications for the development costs, not just in terms of the agreements with Network Rail and the physical works, but also beneath that road are Welsh Water Infrastructure and other utilities, and they'll all need to be lowered, and they have a very significant impact on development costs. Excuse me. But Highways, Mark's team are happy with that proposal. This is just a quick photo or two of the second access, which goes under into the Osborne site. So that's the metal standings there, the rail bridge, I think, and the concrete one on the left is a road bridge. And there's another shot of the rail bridge. In terms of other parts of the proposal, there'd be highways improvements made on Station Road, which other people refer to as Forest Sands, in the area of the entrance to the railway station, Tesco's, and around in that area. So that would just give priority to the traffic, clear priority to traffic leaving the A48 and going into the site, and vice versa, with the other junctions giving way. So that's been agreed by our highways team. There'll be further details coming in as part of the usual Section 278 highways agreements. And then more significantly, some works to the junction with the A48. So you'll see from the application reference number, this one's been in for quite some time, and you'll have heard me talk before about this being held up with a holding objection from the Welsh Government for 18 months. So the A48 itself is a trunk road, so we've had the Welsh Government involved in that regard, and also as you go up Hardwick Hill, we have one of our few air quality management areas in Monmouthshire, and that's caused by the flows of traffic, or rather the less efficient flow of traffic going up the hill, lorries changing gears, cars turning right and the like. So the Welsh Government commissioned a company called Vectos to do a detailed assessment of what improvements were needed, bearing in mind existing traffic flows now, projected changes in traffic movements in the future, and also looking at what's happening over the bridge. So there have been some recent appeal decisions in the Lydney and Tutts Hill area, and also allocated sites in their local development framework just over the border. So albeit in England, and sometimes we pretend things stop at the border, they clearly don't. And certainly that area of Tutts Hill uses Chepstow as their local amenity centre. There's a cross-border movement in terms of education and schools, but in particular for transport, even getting back into the M4, people will come across that way. So there's been a lot of time and effort spent looking at this. The conclusion of the report was actually far less significant than we probably imagined in the beginning, and what the Welsh Government's consultants have recommended are some pretty minor highways improvements on that junction, which are required prior to the occupation of the 101st dwelling, and then some more significant works prior to occupation of the 451st dwelling. I'd show you this slide with a caveat, in that there's a condition proposed that would limit the development to 450. If the developers want more than 450, they'd have to come in with the viability information that I mentioned, and also up to date at that time information about traffic flows and proposals. So this plan shows a scheme that could work. Has been controversial in terms of public consultation, discussed with the ward members for this ward and adjacent, and the town council, and there's a lot of concern about the impacts, because what's proposed on this plan is to reverse the one-way system along Nelson Street. So instead of heading southwest, vehicles will be heading northeast. So there has been an assessment made of how that works, but we haven't gone into it in detail, because that would be considered at a future date if we exceed the 450 dwelling limit. And at that time, in the future, traffic flows will be different anyway, so that'll be reassessed at that time. So I show you that with that caveat. Committee is not being asked to approve this scheme at this time. That will come before you at a future date if the development gets to that level. So they're the primary issues in terms of traffic and access. I mentioned the secondary access and the pedestrian points. The 18-month hold and objection from the Welsh Government was lifted in May 16, and since then we spent some time looking through the remaining details and also the more detailed MCC highways elements of the scheme. But the consultees are satisfied in terms of both highway capacity, subject to those comments, and also air quality management. And you'll see in the reports that we talk about the fallback position. So obviously the site at the moment has a very minimal industrial use, but in planning terms that use is still lawful, and could resurrect without the need for planning permission, and could go back to its former heydays when there were far greater vehicle movements. In terms of traffic flow, somewhere in front of you should be a plan looking like this, with some figures on. Ignore the blue line, that's just a weird blip of the photocopier, that's not some kind of new motorway or river. But the black figures in the boxes and the arrows are existing traffic flows, and the red boxes and arrows are proposed based on the situation in 2021, 450 dwellings built. So looking at those natural changes in traffic patterns as models predict. So this does set out the changes in vehicle movements based on the current road layout and up to 450 dwellings. So these figures have been studied in detail. I think I'm right in saying that, Mark, you put together this diagram to help clarify matters based on some other diagrams that the applicants had done. So this is trying to clarify to the local community and town council and members what exactly is proposed and what the impact will be. So we are satisfied as officers that those traffic flow changes can be accommodated by the road network, and if it exceeds the 450 dwelling mark, then those further changes will come before us for further consideration. So there's no outstanding objections from the statutory consultees on air quality or highway capacity limits. I'd also just point out really briefly that these highway movements, traffic flows, were based on standardised trip movements. So at the outset, the applicants came forward with some arguably generous modal splits. So because undoubtedly the site is right next to the town centre, there'll be employment uses on the site. There's employment sites within walking distance. There's a supermarket in walking distance. The railway station's in walking distance. The bus stops are in walking distance. So in an ideal world, you could change the modal split of how people travel, and suggest that far fewer people will use cars because of all those factors. We as officers weren't happy with the extent to which the applicants have gone on that anyway. But just to be clear, the applicants have used the totally standardised modal split. So ignoring those benefits of the site, they've used a very conventional, this proportion of people will be car reliant. And these figures are all based on that info. So we do consider it to be a worst case scenario in that sense. In terms of the other topics, Chair, in terms of the ecology and flood risk type issues, just regaining my notes. Oh no, sorry, I do design and layout first. In terms of design and layout, we have the site divided up into 3 character areas. They're not clear on any of the plans, but there would be an area sort of dubbed New Chepstow, Steelyard area towards the centre of the site, and the Hardwick Cliffs area to the south. In this area is an existing quarry, and that would have some fairly significant works to enhance it in terms of ecology, provide some mitigation for species on the site now, and also the pedestrian route that I mentioned to you. There's a 6,500 square metres of floor space being provided for employment purposes in the site. So you've got Bruno House here. Indicatively, the employment space will probably be towards this northern area, but that will come before us. The distribution of that will come before us in the future as part of the reserve matters. What you will see on this plan, or perhaps more clearly on the next plan, all these coloured areas, including the green and the various other shades, are some really significant green infrastructure works. There was a figure mentioned yesterday, and I'm afraid remember what it was, but the proportion of the site actually being built on is relatively low. There's some significant areas of green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, so natural surface water drainage, lagoons and the like, the intertidal mudflats where they'd be enhanced, the heritage assets with the slipways and other means of signposting that throughout the site, and the quarry. And also a buffer alongside the railway where there's some extensive tree planting now, and that's an important back corridor. So that will be protected from development by a bit of a buffer and consideration of the uses that go in there. So in terms of the layout, we're incredibly pleased with what's proposed. It really has grasped our green infrastructure policy and aspirations and the way in which it connects with the wider site. And also it's really about what we talk about placemaking, rather than just sticking some houses on a bit of land. It's really trying to make a destination and an area for the benefit of both the residents there and the existing community of Chepstow. So we're really pleased with what's proposed in that sense. The slipways I've already mentioned. I don't think I've got a detailed plan of the play space for you, but there's 3 laps proposed, so local areas of play. 1 NEEP, which is a neighbourhood equipped area of play, and also a mugger, so a multi-use games area. The 3 laps are spread through the site, so 1 in each character area. The mugger and the NEEP are up in this area, so readily accessible via the secondary access to the main part of Chepstow, as well as being in decent proximity to the residents on this development, and also those through here via the pedestrian link. So again, we're really pleased with that provision. The on-site provision very generously exceeds the national playing field standards, or fields in trusts. So again, we're pleased with that regard. Briefly now on the last 2 points, ecology and flooding. As I mentioned, the river's very important for various designation purposes, but the statutory consultees are happy with what's proposed. There's numerous conditions proposed, you'll have seen. We've done a habitat regs assessment, and the officers are satisfied with that approach. And there's a very significant environmental statement that accompanies this application. I'm going through that in a lot of detail. I mentioned the quarry already, so I won't talk about that again. In terms of flood risk, these areas in reds would be raised for the residential development as required by NRW. And interestingly, you'll see in the late correspondence, there's an amendment to a condition about flooding, which talks about a purple area. That's this area here. There's no residential development or built development on there. This is ecology area and play space, but there's oddly a requirement for that area to be kept at a lower level, and that's because if that were raised, then if there were a flood, this area of Chepstow on the other side of the railway bridge wouldn't drain. So NRW is very clear that this has to be kept at a lower level, which the applicants agreed to do, and NRW is confirmed in late correspondence they're happy with that approach, and would tie the land levels to this plan, and that purple area will be kept at the lower level. And then last but certainly no means least is the viability of the scheme. So you see in the report we talk about the viability and what's being offered, and unusually the applicants have agreed to go through some of this detail. We won't go through them to figures in immense detail, but there's a significant amount of abnormal construction costs. That's partly due to it being a brownfield site that needs remediation. There's some land raising costs, there's utility costs, network rail associated costs, some very significant ones. On a scheme of that size and that nature, that's not unusual, but it does obviously have an impact on the viability of the scheme. Within the costs, there's £1.8 million being spent on what I describe as placemaking aspects. So that includes the green infrastructure works, the riverside footpath, numerous references yesterday and in the report to the heritage signposting. So there's massive history to this site, and that really will be made the most of with the one restored slipway, the public art that's proposed on that, and those associated works. There's £1 million on providing public open space and play equipment on the site, and that will go on to be managed by a private management company in the future, which again we're happy with as officers, very happy with. And then in the report it talks about the 1.5 acres of clean and service land which will be offered to the council at well below market value. We have a price agreed for the provision of affordable housing. So we set out in the report issues around viability. We've had it all independently assessed by the District Valuation Service, who's gone through the abnormal costs in great detail with the quantity surveyor, and all of the other things around profit, build costs, sale values and the like, and accepted those figures. They do recommend a viability appraisal review, both in terms of time which we would recommend is tied into the 106, and also should it ever go over the 450 dwellings, because all of this information is based on 450. So if they're building more, yes, they've got more build costs, but some of the infrastructure costs proportionately less, and they've got more revenue coming in. So the applicant's happy with that approach. District Value has looked at it in great detail and accepts that position. So it is well below the 35% policy position in terms of affordable housing. That is disappointing. You know, I've got my housing hat on as well in terms of that need, not just my planning hat. But we do have to accept in policy terms with viability, if the evidence says that this is the viability situation, then that is what it is, and we have to look at the benefits of the site coming forward, and what the situation would be if it didn't come forward in terms of housing, not just the single 35% percentage. It does say in the report, and it's clarified in late correspondence, it does incorrectly say in the committee report, so paragraph 5.8, that the 1.5 acres would provide 45 dwellings, which is 10% equivalence. I do apologise, that's an error on my part. It is 1.5 acres as stated, none of that's changed, but 1.5 acres would deliver, at the densities proposed, around about 25, maybe 30 units, so it's nearer 5 or 6% equivalence. So what we do with that land is we'd be passed the land, it would be remediated and serviced, so there'd be connections there for sewers and the like. And then we would work with RSLs to come in and build the affordable housing, and we'd access other forms of grant funding to make that happen. As is mentioned in the report briefly, Chair, the applicants did propose an alternative, which was a way of delivering some low-cost home ownership homes in a different way, but they'll be based on 70% of open market value in Chepstow, which is a great offer on face value, but the nature of house prices in Chepstow is that 70% of open market value isn't affordable in terms of our actual housing need. So as generous as that offer was, we've negotiated this alternative with the developers, and Shirley's much happier that having the land is better than what was proposed. So, Chair, that wraps up the main considerations. As I mentioned, there's late reps, including the one that came out this morning, where we go through the planning conditions and really give them a shake-up. There's a lot of repetition in there, and some that needed tidying up. So those conditions are now amended as per the late reps, and it's clarified in terms of the 1.5 acres and what that delivers. But Chair, in conclusion, as officers, we would commend this scheme to you. We realise it's disappointing in terms of the affordable housing, but we think that's fully justified, and we've had that independently assessed. We think there's some massive benefits to bringing this site forward, not least it's a significant contribution towards our housing needs. It's an allocated site in the LDP, and it does open up this rather currently tired and private but central part of Chepstow, would open it up to the public with the riverfront. The heritage benefits we talked about yesterday, I think, are very clear to be seen, and the environment that'll be created will be really significant. So on that basis, Chair, we recommend that the scheme's approved, subject to 106 agreements as detailed. Separately, there'll be a Section 278 highways agreement, and also the conditions as set out in the amended late correspondence. One very last point, there is a bit of a question mark, still discussion going on about condition 11 in the late reps, which is a construction management plan. A bit of to-ing and fro-ing about whether environmental health really want or need that condition. So with your permission, Chair, would ask for flexibility to finish that discussion as officers and either add that condition or delete it, depending on environmental health's wish, if that's okay with you.
Yes, I think it's a very sensible idea. There's a lot of hard work has gone into this application, and it was very interesting to have a visit there yesterday, because much detail, as we've seen on the screen today, I mean, there is no substitute for any site visit, no matter where it is, and I found it very, very interesting yesterday, especially the collation of all the history, and that was being protected for everybody in the future to glean the history of that site. So it was very, very interesting. I call upon, first of all, Councillor Dale Rook, is it, please? Chair of the Planning and Administration Committee, I gather. You have 4 minutes, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, councillors. Chepstow Town Council approves this development, but we approve it with some reservation. We've always had a condition. We've always had fears about the traffic analysis that was presented originally, which has subsequently been changed and amended to display a more standard modal split. We still consider that the projected movements are far below what we would expect from the development within the town. We also have concerns and would hope that the council would impose conditions to help alleviate those concerns. Firstly, with the flooding down at the area 7 Princess Plaza, I think it's called, because of the impact that would have on the already expensive remedial works that we've already had carried out in the bottom half of Chepstow. It would only force the water into a different direction that would further impact on the flooding at the lower end of town. One thing that I don't think has been taken into consideration with regards to the traffic analysis would be the capacity of the A48 at those peak times. We tend to see a view of the capacity of the A48 over a 24-hour period rather than at key times. There are certain key times that are very, very crucial for how Chepstow operates. Going to work and coming home from work in the evenings and taking children to and from local schools has a huge, huge impact on the way that traffic moves in Chepstow. So I would hope that there would be some further study into the capacity of the A48 and the impact of this development on the wider impact, not just on us in Chepstow, but the neighbouring communities on the English side of the border, Sedbury and Tuthill. There's times where it has taken 2 hours for people to travel from Sedbury to join up to the A48 because one single incident is enough to cause a huge problem in Chepstow. I'm extremely disappointed as well, as are the rest of the Town Council, to find out that the social housing provision has been greatly reduced and affordable housing provision on the site has been greatly reduced. It means for us in Chepstow that development now has no impact locally, or very little impact locally. The development is going to be bought up by people from out of the area, as suggested by your officer Mark Hand. The people in Chepstow will not be able to afford to buy these properties, and I'm extremely disappointed that no provision has been made to secure that affordable and social housing portion of the development. We were also quite disappointed at the Town Council with regards to the detail that came with the application. The flooding risk at the bottom end of town came with very little detail, giving you very little analysis of how they expect any remedial works to work. I would also hope that the County Council would consider how the affordable and social housing is spread across the site. In other places you get the social housing and affordable housing confined to one area, which kind of makes it a bit of a no-go area and certainly tarred as a lower income area. So I would hope that the council would pepper pot any affordable housing around the other developments, and I would also hope that this council would continue to talk with the neighbouring authority in Gloucestershire to look for a long-term solution to the traffic issues that blight us in Chepstow. And that would be my closing remark. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We now have another local county councillor to speak, I believe. Or are you...
It's local resident.
Yeah. He was also a candidate in the election. I am a candidate in the election.
Right. Okay, thank you. Could state your name, please. You have 4 minutes.
That doesn't matter, does it?
My name is Jez Becker. I'm a Chepstow resident. I'm representing my own views and the views of some of the residents who have approached me. as part of the campaign for council. It's a little bit preemptive because you're not being asked to consider the extra traffic proposals, and that's mainly what I'm concerned about today, because the gyratory system around the St Mary's car park on the A48 going into the Station Road area is a suggestion which doesn't really solve a problem. All it would do would push traffic around the gyratory, and you'd have to change the timing of the lights underneath it, which would still cause the same sort of delays along the trunk road, which would impact on the pollution and air quality, which, as I'm sure you all know, we're going to get fined for in Chepstow, because it is terrible. If you walk up Hardwick Hill, you feel the grime on your face, you taste it in your mouth. It is abysmal. And it also doesn't really take into account the traffic coming from Lower Chepstow that wants to get onto the A48 as well. There's a corner when you reverse the flow where two roads come in, which is Church Road and Lower Church Street, I think it is, which would feed traffic into this queue of traffic waiting to come onto the A48. Now, that amount of traffic may at the moment be reasonably mild. It isn't, because you've got the residents of Lower Chepstow, but it's also going to increase when residents take up their homes in the 7 Key development at the bottom of town, because that's going to be their main route to come up to that junction. So essentially, the entire sort of loop is ineffective. It does nothing to solve the problem of the movement of traffic on the A48, which in turn is the root of the problem for the air quality management. From what I've been talking to people about, when I've been talking to them, it's seen as a bit of a stalking horse, a sort of way of putting a sticky plaster situation on the traffic movements of the A48 and dodging, as Dale has rightly said, the real problem, which is a traffic system that's at breaking point running through from Sedbury up through Chepstow and up through Hardwick Hill. In terms of the development itself, I have nothing but positive things to say about the development. I think I've been on a site visit myself. I think it's a fantastic development which really captures the historical nature of the site. I think it's going to be the kind of development that we will aspire to, that kind of benchmark, with the possible exception of maybe a little more social housing. But we will probably want more developments of that calibre. It's merely this traffic system that seems to be the bigger point of concern for the people that I talk to, which I don't believe is supported by the developers. It's not supported by local business, and it's not supported by local residents. So although it isn't for your consideration today, when it does come up, I urge the council to take all those matters into account when considering it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The local member is, I believe, Armand Watts, who hasn't...
No, I'm the local member.
You are the local member.
Local member.
Oh, right, thank you. Sorry for that, Peter. You may also have... I believe you get 6 minutes.
I don't need 6 minutes.
Oh, right. Thank you very much indeed, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. Interestingly, this, as has already been pointed out, is a long-running issue, and the time to address some of the matters that have been discussed today is obviously not immediately and now. I think there are very many things in all of this to be commended. I'm particularly impressed by the way this has been approached in more recent times in comparison with the original work for this site. And I'm particularly pleased to see the evidence of cross-border thinking and planning that we've had demonstrated even this afternoon. So overall, this is not a scheme to which I could object at this stage. The time for objections was long ago, and the time for wishing that other things might have happened at that site is long over. But there is one thing which I do think is particularly distressing about the information we have before us today, and I echo the comments of the two previous speakers, in particular Councillor Rook. I think it is a huge shame that there is so little affordable housing possible within this scheme. And that's a shame, because actually that's what Chepstow needs. It doesn't need hundreds of other market-priced houses to attract people into the town. It needs somewhere where existing residents can afford to live. So, if the quantity that we've been told has to be for this site, fair enough. But I would suggest that the Chief Planning Officer talks urgently to the Chief Housing Officer to see whether there are other ameliorations that might be possible within Chepstow to address the problem, which has been from the very beginning, that there is insufficient affordable or social housing, or a mix of both. So, Chief Planning Officer kindly drew certain matters to our attention, and rightly so. But other parts of the council, I think, could be tasked with looking hard at other options for affordable housing in Chepstow. That's what Chepstow needs, and if this site can't accommodate it, then we must look for other options. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. You also will have 2 minutes to sum up if you so wish later. Okay, right, we now have nobody else by the look of it. Oh, Phil, but the other local member, Councillor Armand Watts, had suggested he wanted to speak, but we've had no confirmation, so I don't know if he's available at all. So I will now take you, Councillor Phil Hobson, if you wish to speak now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr Viz, Deputy Chair, for leave to speak today. Actually, I'm here with my Cabinet member hat on for affordable housing, because I think this is something which does need to be thrashed out and discussed today. To say that I'm disappointed by the numbers, particularly when it was down to 10%, which was a typo, then to be given the news it's more like 5 to 6, well, disappointment doesn't cover it. I'm gutted. Sorry, Madam Chair, how many minutes have I got? 4? 6, thank you. You've seen the viability studies. I have been on site. The developers were very kind to let me on site, and they spent, I think, 3 hours, considerable amount of time, but as you know, it's vast, to show me exactly the work that's going to have to be done on site to make it viable, basically, for residential housing. That has affected viability. So that's gone through the independent process. I have spoken with the housing officer's team. There is nothing in the process that suggests that the numbers that we've got are not robust. So I'm content that the availability of the amount of housing on the affordable housing side is correct. Nevertheless, that is disappointing. And you know, and I know that it's sometimes you're hitting your head against a brick wall to get housing affordable, particularly for young people, and particularly in places like Chepstow, which are facing housing stress, particularly on rising prices, which will rise, we are told, rapidly once Severn Bridge tolls are reduced next year. So where does that leave us? Well, I think there is an opportunity, members, and I obviously want to leave this with you today, and this is the opinion that we've had discussions again with housing and planning. Where can we go with this? The offer of the housing at 70% affordable to buy, so 7% of the open market rate, you know and I know, we know what the entry-level housing costs are. That is out of reach. Is out of reach on the affordable aspect for lots and lots of local people. So that I think we've let go, and the offer of the 1.5 acres gives us an opportunity to do something. Now, in the paperwork, you have seen that there is a way that Monmouthshire can take on the land, and then with Welsh Government grant and social housing grant, and working with maybe 2 housing associations, we could do something. Actually, I think that's a modest outlook, and I think that we should be a bit more bolder. And I think we have 1.5 acres in different parts of the site. We can do something pretty innovative. We are not bound by many restrictions on what we could do. We know that social housing provision in the Chepstow area for over 55s is a lot greater than it is for people who are under 40, for example. So there is nothing to stop us really in working with any partner with Welsh Government grant, who are very eager to meet their 20,000 affordable housing target by 2022, that we can come up with a scheme that really does help with social cohesion, that really aims it at the young people in Chepstow, because you've got it on your casework lists as well as I have, and that is we have got people who are trapped, young people who are trapped, who are in full-time work. They cannot get on the housing ladder because housing is now out of reach. And recently I had a constituent, and you've had it too because you brought them to me, when you refer them to the housing options team, and what do we get? Because you're in work, you're in category 4 and 5. In other words, no chance. That's the message. We can't allow this to continue. If we've got an opportunity with this site, which is a great opportunity, then there is something that we can do with that 1.5 acres. We could go for better density or high density. We could do architectural scheme. We can work with any partner. And this isn't being brave and a step into the unknown. There are plenty of examples of local areas around us who have done exactly that. So what I'm asking members is, we go with the 1.5 acres. It is incredibly gutting that we've got down to this number, but you've seen the viability studies, and it has driven that number down. And those numbers are robust. So it is disappointing, but we now need to move ahead. Let us snatch from that disappointment an opportunity that we have with the available land. Let's do something innovative. Let's do something for young people, because they're the ones that are most in housing need and under housing stress. I would just make one other comment, and I'm going to use a technical term, the Tesco junction. And the technical term is crazy idea, but as you know, the development is not going to exceed 450, so therefore we can probably discount that one today. All I would say is, being controversial, but hey, why not? I mean, I may not be here next week, I may never be here again, so I'll just put this out to you. I would like to see a caveat on the viability, and I would ask Head of Planning to just come back in on this. We know that the Severn Bridge tolls are coming down next year. We're all expecting. We know people holding back from sale because of speculation that prices are going to go up rapidly because of that. That will increase the value of the land, and I think that it would only be fair if land values and property values increase, that we should revisit the viability matrix and see if there is not more opportunity to squeeze more out for really acutely needed affordable housing, particularly for young people in the area. But I'll leave it there, and I'll ask Planning if that is a viable proposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor. You also will have you can't have 2 minutes, I don't think, to sum up. Sorry. We now have the agent, I believe. Could you please state your name when you have 4 minutes? Thank you.
So I didn't hear that because I mispronounced afternoon, which is a good start. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Gent from Savills. I'm the agent for the application. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I'd also like to thank the officers for the work that they've done to deliver the application to today's meeting as well. As most of you will know, Maybe has been working with the council on the future of this site for some time. Our objective has been to find a solution which will trigger the lasting, high quality and sustainable transformation of one of Monmouthshire's largest areas of brownfield land. And this is what is before you now, and we are truly delighted to see the application reach committee with a recommendation for approval. The time spent on it means that the application has been fully considered. Even Mark's fairly long presentation does mask years of debate and discussion, which is entirely right for a site of this scale and an opportunity like this. Your officers have scrutinised every aspect of the proposals, as have experts from Welsh Government and Natural Resources Wales, and a number of key conclusions stand out. On traffic, there are really only two key points. Firstly, the site is in a very sustainable location. Nobody denies that. It's close to shops, town centre, public transport, local facilities. So there is every chance that people living there will not need to use their cars. And that's what the planning system is charged with, putting things in places where they don't need to use their cars. Secondly, though, even if everyone used their car, the scheme can be accommodated on the existing road network. Significant work has been done for and by the Welsh Government on this point, the A48 being a trunk road, as Mr. Hand has explained. Traffic will increase, of course, but even at the top end of predictions, the analysis says it can be managed with some identified and agreed improvements. And this point is accepted by the Council's officers, highways officers too. It's also worth noting, as has been pointed out, that if the scheme doesn't succeed, something will happen on this site. As it stands, it could be used for general industrial or commercial activity, which would generate significant amounts of traffic without the need for further approvals. But that's not what we want to do. That approach wouldn't leave the real and positive legacy for the town that is at the heart of the application. There has been a consistent focus on the site's environment and the proposals, which include a new riverside park, new habitat areas, and a huge extension to the Wales Coast Path, doubling or trebling the length of the coast path for Chepstow. And all of these proposals have been welcomed by the council's experts and NRWs too. That's putting to one side, of course, the major economic boost for Monmouthshire the scheme would have. Hundreds of jobs will be created during construction operation, and its location, as we've seen next to the town centre, will see more spending in Chepstow especially. And the application follows planning policy to the absolute letter. Nationally, this says priority is to be given to recycling brownfield land in existing settlements before greenfields are released. At a local level, the site's allocated for housing-led regeneration in the adopted LDP. Housing here will therefore make a major contribution to the supply of land for new homes in the right place and at the right time. We can also be confident that the application proposes the best mix of development. Previously developed land can be expensive to develop, but we've carried out a detailed assessment of the scheme's viability, and this has been checked independently for and by the council by the district valuer. This shows that there are challenges, but that with the approach discussed and recorded in your officer's report, the scheme can be delivered. And that approach itself follows guidance on viability and best practice, which has been applied already in Monmouthshire, the rest of Wales, and throughout the UK. And for all these reasons, the scheme meets the primary objective of the planning system, which is to make the best and most effective use of land in existing urban areas and encourage sustainable patterns of development. Your agreement this afternoon to the recommendation before you, it really is a key milestone in the transformation of the site. As I said at the beginning, we really appreciate the time and attention of your officers. We fully support the recommendation and ask please that you support it too, so we can really get going on this very important and very special project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've just about made it just over 4 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's quite all right. I believe Mark wishes to say something. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. It's probably just as well I didn't have a 4-minute limit, or you might think the otherwise. In terms of a couple of points that were raised, I just wanted to come back. So Councillor Farley talked about me having a conversation with the Chief Housing Officer, but due to our structure, that's actually me. So I've had the conversation. I mean, joking aside, I've got a team of housing experts, so we have had some discussions around this. You all know how passionate Shirley is about affordable housing, and that she doesn't let anything like this go lightly at all. So yeah, she's got the same disappointment in terms of the level of affordable or the provision, but was really keen on the land being the best deal for us in terms of meeting our need rather than the applicant's previous offer. Councillor Hobson mentioned the opportunities for us, instead of perhaps going down a more standardised route in how we use the land, doing something more innovative. I think that's a really good suggestion and something that we can suitably word the Section 106 to allow for. As you might be aware, the Welsh Government's announced a target of 20,000 affordable homes in Wales over the next 5 years, which is quite some ambitious ask, and is also in the process of putting forward all kinds of funding packages to try and deliver some innovative ways of doing things. So I think there's a real opportunity for us. Contrary to what we usually say about older people's affordable accommodation, the real need in this area is for younger people, so we can have a real look at different ways of doing things and run with that suggestion from Cabinet member. And then last but not least, just a really brief update. Two more things, one is a brief update. In the report, we talk about the 1.5 acres and the desire for it to be in 3 parcels, which will be dotted through the site. We've actually spoken to the applicants, and we prefer that to be in 2 parcels rather than 3. But they would still be around about the 12 to 15 units on each bit, which complies with our pepper potting. Councillor Rook from the Town Council mentioned about how it would be distributed. It wouldn't be the usual pepper potting because of the way it's been delivered in 2 parcels of land, but it would still meet our policy, and we wouldn't want it all to be in one clump. And then, last but not least, if I may, Chair, you triggered my memory when you mentioned about Councillor Watts. He didn't explicitly send it to me as late correspondence, but to be on the safe side, he did email me yesterday to express his disappointment about the affordable housing level being the equivalent of 5% rather than 10%, and refers to the specific localised housing crisis in Chepstow, which will explode once the Severn Bridge toll is halved. So he's concerned that the scheme isn't future-proof in terms of local housing needs, doesn't see any tangible benefit to the community, and is concerned about some misinformation, referring to a previous issue about traffic information, which is a couple of years old and long since corrected, and also this error. So just bringing that to your attention. Doesn't change the officer recommendation at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mark. I think everybody's well aware now of the situation of our housing need, and I'm sure Shirley will do her utmost. I mean, Shirley does dig her heels in hard, and she's usually pretty good at coming up with the money. Most of us were there yesterday, so I would like to see anybody else local to it who would. I believe Councillor Higginson was first to put his hand up, then our Councillor Blakeborough next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a substantial site. There's no argument with that. Going to the point, there's another access onto that site as opposed to the one under the rail bridge. I think that's a good idea. It's going towards the A48. And in relation to the traffic volumes on there, I need to point out, I think it was a high employment site. There were a lot of people working on there, and a lot of those I would understand would be working shifts. So you'd have pressure points on sort of 6 till 2 and the 2 till 10 issues. But and I want to go to the affordable housing. I would like to see a little bit more than 1.5 acres, because if it was only extended to 2 acres, it would help the affordable housing situation. And what's coming to my mind is the way property prices have rocketed in the Severn-side area over the last couple of months. I mean, when I say rocket, I mean rocket. And as a consequence of that, without a shadow of a doubt, any properties that are built on this site, the houses for sale, then, if you like, they're going to increase, whatever the projections are now, is going to be that much higher by the time they are built. And I think as a consequence of that, a little bit more leeway could be made on the 1.5 acres if it's only to 2. And the value of the site is bringing that to my mind. It's a viability test, and I just wonder if on that test, how would it equate to the present housing values? Housing values are going to increase in the next year tremendously, or the next 2 years tremendously. As a consequence of that, profitability is going to go up as well, which leads me to reiterate what I said earlier. I think if you could afford to go higher than the 1.5 acres for the affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Blakeborough, please.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose, first of all, when you give us the overview and we've looked at the plans, there does seem to be a sense that there's a great deal of care and attention to create this living space rather than it just being a housing development. And I think that's interesting and exciting. And definitely the scheme seeks to protect and also enhance the history and the natural beauty of the area. And it's a fantastic opportunity. But there are some, as you say, disappointments, and I can only echo what everybody is saying about the affordable housing. And I wanted to look at the numbers rather than just the percentages, using my human calculator here. So they may not be exact, but it just kind of gives an idea. So if we did have the 35% affordable housing, we would come up with it would be over 150 properties. But with the 5%, it's the 22. But we do have the benefit of the 1.5 acres, but that would only give us between 25 and 30. So the difference is you're looking at about 100 families that are going to be disappointed. So I think it's important to stipulate that number, so it is highly disappointing. In terms of the bridge, it is predicted that property and land will go up in value when the bridge tolls come down. So I think there's a caveat or a condition in there that the appraisal will be reviewed to ensure that we are getting value for money. Because there's prices now and prices in the future, I think, will be very different, and that needs to be looked at. I think the cap on the 450 homes is absolutely right, so that if it does go above that, that needs re-looking at again in terms of having more money for the infrastructure. And looking at the 1.5 acres, yeah, it would be good if we could get more than the 1.5 acres. Although it's an opportunity, I'm just wondering what assurance we have that we would get the money from the Welsh Government in order to have affordable housing on that site.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeford. Mark, do you wish to reply to that query of Debbie's?
Yeah, just in terms of that point, we only know what social housing grant we're going to get for a next kind of rolling 3-year period. So we do know for definite next year and the year after, and there's quite often top-ups, which Shirley has a list of projects to put in. I haven't got the figures in front of me now, but last year we got significantly more in our allocation because of the way Shirley runs the programme. So it's really effective. But what we do know is that they've got this project, the Welsh Government's got this project for the 20,000 affordable units over the next 5 years, and they've already started putting some significant, multi-million pounds figures out there for funding pots. So the challenge with the current kind of 3-year rolling programme is realistically, by the time we've got reserve matters consent and the land's remediated and before us, and they've got planning consent themselves on it, we're towards the end of that 3-year period. But we have got confidence there is more money coming, and that Welsh Government proposal will keep coming. So yeah, I haven't got a pot of money in the back pocket, but I'd be extremely surprised if there wasn't money there for it, or other solutions at that time.
Thank you for that, Mark. Who else wishes to speak? Councillor Ralph Chapman, then Councillor Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When we arrived at the site yesterday, I fully expected, as in other site visits, that the presentation would be done by planning officers. Now, when my community council contacted the planning officer, they said they were told they could attend, members of the public, but not speak unless to clarify some situation. Here we had yesterday, somebody met us on site, and he'd done the full presentation and took us around the site. Now, to me, I would like an explanation why that only applied to this application and not to others we've had in the past. Now, going on to the site, I think this is a site we do need developed. The scale of the site, the cost of the site, the value of the site, I just cannot accept the low number of affordable houses. So, unless there's something come forward in the future, I won't be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the first line of what we've got down here. This is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access, and we mustn't forget that. I'm also totally committed to providing as much or even more affordable housing, if you like, than we can afford, if that is at all possible. And I commend both Peter and Phil for what they've said, and certainly Phil's ideas certainly do need exploring. And if you like, a slight interjection, we've heard today how passionate we're all feeling down here about this site, about the amount of affordable housing, about the information we've got from the District Valuers Service that says that's all can be afforded on the site, the 1.5 acres given for affordable housing. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately is the wrong word. If we've got experts in the field that are independent, I for one, I'm not going to stand up and say they don't know what they're talking about. I just think it's sad that it's worked out this way. But it's been mentioned that property prices are rocketing, and we're hoping that the agents and the applicants are listening to what we say, and if the increase in prices is as much as people here have mentioned, then we've got to come back to them in the very near future. I suggest to see what else can be done on that aspect. Also, we have a cabinet member here responsible for social and affordable housing, and we've heard that the Welsh Government wants to build 20,000 houses in the next 5 years or so. I suggest a letter going from this planning authority, this council, to the Welsh Government, saying we've got a site here that's crying out for more affordable housing. What have you got in your back pockets? Just in case there is something there, and we can jog them a little bit. Having said all that, we also have the traffic problems, and I keep saying time and time again, we either have houses and build houses, and if we do, we're going to have traffic problems, or do we say, traffic problems are going to be so that great that we just won't build the houses. We've just got to get our heads around the fact that we might have to sit in a traffic jam for a bit longer so that our children can actually have a house to live in. Anyway, as I said at the beginning, it's an outline application with all reserved matters. It's in our LDP. The consequences of us saying no to this, I'd like spelt out by Mark, if that's at all possible, and then we can go from there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. I think it's very sad that there's not, on such a large site, more affordable housing. We've got loads of youngsters that they call now the JAM society, of just about managing, of young couples working, contributing to society, not a drain on society, and private rental is going up all the time. And I think it's very sad that they can't aspire with the high rents to at some stage in the near future to get on the property ladder. So I well understand the feeling of the members of the committee. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to just make another point away from the affordable. And taking up what Ralph said, I think that, yet it was unusual yesterday, but I think it was necessary that at the end of the morning we got a feel of what we were looking at and what history we were there to protect, as well as provide housing, and we certainly all came away, I think, with that in mind. My concern is, and it was made clear to us yesterday, that the applicant might probably put this development out in 3 phases. Because of its unique location between the railway line and the river, it's going to form a suburb to Chepstow in its own right. It's going to be a special place, and personally I'd call it the slipways if it was me, because I think that's what was the important point made to us yesterday. And I would ask if we can possibly do it. I know it's unusual, but I would like to see the design of all the properties, if it was 3 developers, were linked together so we have some continuity. We do not want 3 blocks of different kinds of design and different housing from different developers in this one unique site. Please, if that can possibly be done, I would be more than grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Mark, you wish to comment, please?
Yeah, Chair, do you want me to come back on those 2 points? In terms of Councillor Harris's question, there's no point in ducking it. If the application were refused, then we have 2 issues really. One is that we're not delivering our housing requirement for the LDP. We already are short of a 5-year housing land supply, We're about to meet next week about our next update. But those figures are reliant on the LDP allocated sites coming forward. So if we take out something as significant as 450 units, it's literally 10% of our LDP need, the original 4,500. So there's a sizable issue there, and similarly a question mark about where else do we go in Chepstow if not here. We're heavily constrained by the river, the floodplain, the AOMB to the north, and the Green Wedge and the historic landscape to the west. As Tim, the agent, mentioned in his presentation, in planning policy terms, it does tick all the boxes. It's a central brownfield site, so exactly the kind of place we should be building houses. Unfortunately, with some of that, with the brownfield sites, comes these abnormal costs, which make it really quite a challenge. And it's something I was very used to dealing with in a previous life. Is maybe more unusual in our leafier surrounds. So that's the one challenge that would happen if it refused. The other one, and I know members never really like me saying this, but the applicants would be bound to appeal. They'd be stupid not to. And my advice to you is that we'd lose. The inspectors would look at the viability evidence, would ask us what evidence we have, and we'd have to go through our district valuation independent report, which backs up what the applicants have offered. So I don't think that will be a happy outcome. Or I suppose the third outcome is the developers either walk away or carry on using it for industrial purposes. And again, I don't think that's a good outcome for Chepstow either. I mean, there would be benefits from job creation in a narrow way, but I don't think it's the best use of that site in planning terms. So there's the answer to Councillor Harris's question. In answer to Councillor Clark's comments about the design, what's proposed is 3 character areas, and the master plan talks around some different aspects of those. But I agree it is important that we don't end up with something looking like 3 different house builders with nothing tying them together. So, Chair, what I'd suggest is we could add a condition requiring a design code, which would have some of those elements and tie it together for the whole site. That's something we've done on other sites. Can be done in a sensible high-level sense, but just have that continuity throughout the site.
Thank you, Mark. I'll take Jim Higginson, and I'll ask Councillor Farley if he wishes 2 minutes later to sum up. Councillor Higginson.
Can I come in after Councillor Farley summed up now, please?
If you so wish, if that is
yes, to make a proposal.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Farley.
I think, members, you've heard some compelling points this afternoon. I'm not speaking of whatever I might have said. I think Mr. Becker, Councillor Rook, representative from Savills, and our own officers have given and made some very telling points. There clearly is a deal of scope within what you have before you, provided the conditions, etc., are set aright, to turn what is already very promising into something even better. And I am pleased that the affordable housing issue has been picked up. Whether that is eventually resolved on this site or by other means or both is not for me to say, but it's clearly a message that has got through. Final thing I would say, and those of you who know me will know that I invariably say this, what if not? Councillor Harris took us into this territory, what if not? What if it was the case that this afternoon this whole package was to be turned down? The first thing that would happen, I'm sure, would be growing pressure on greenfield sites around and in Chepstow, particularly those on the other side of the link road. And I would suspect, and if I go back a few years to when there was a threat to Chepstow Woods for the development of a possible Centre Parks, the greenfield lobby are nothing if not active, energetic and vociferous in a way that I don't think actually overall people have been about Fairfield Maybe. The issues about the Fairfield Maybe site have largely been, okay, so let's see what we can turn this into rather than can we stop it. And I suspect that if this was refused in the form that it is in, with all the scope that there is and that there can be added to it for further improvement, then you would face the wrath of a very different kind of lobby on arguing on behalf of a number of other sites. And I, for one, am glad I won't be on the council when that happens. Thank you, Chair, and can I thank you once again for your courtesy in allowing me to speak, as you have done on previous meetings of this committee, and I thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farley. It's been a pleasure working with you and also on other committees. Thank you. I wish you were well in your retirement. Councillor Higginson now.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I propose we accept this application bear in mind it is outlined with all matters reserved apart from the access, of course. And, you know, there's much been said about the affordable housing element of it, and indeed the rocketing prices of property and how we could affect the value of that site. And on that basis, I go back to what I said. I move we accept this proposal, but that offers may be able to talk to the developers, and we might be able to get a little increase on the affordable housing element of it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Right. Anybody? Councillor Powell?
I'll second.
Councillor Higgins has moved approval and Councillor Powell has seconded that proposal. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's 11 for approval, Chairman.
And those against?
And
One against.
Therefore, the application is moved.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Right, Councillor Powell will leave the chamber. Thank you. Now we go to our last application of the day. Now there's quiet in the chamber, and this is at Penalt, Upper Lanant Farm, 01206, construction of a garden storage building.
Thank you, Chair. This application was presented to the Planning Committee on the 4th of April with a recommendation for approval. However, members were minded to refuse the application due to the size and scale of the building and its location within the Wye Valley AONB. The application is therefore represented with a reason for refusal, which is outlined in the report. However, since the last committee, the agent has submitted an amended plan for consideration with the building reduced in size. So that is the current proposal. They've lost one bay, yes. It shows the building reduced from 18 metres by 9 metres to 14.15 metres by 9 metres instead. The log store has been omitted from the end, as you can see. So if members are minded to approve the smaller building, it's proposed to include an extra condition to those in the original report, requiring the building to be timber-clad in its entirety within 12 months of its substantial completion. So it's there for members to discuss.
Thank you for that, Paula. I believe Councillor Blakeborough, this is in your ward.
Thanks, Chair. Be very quick, really. I still think it is too big for domestic use. I think it was mooted actually at our last meeting. What if we removed the end there and everybody still felt it was going to be too big? So I would support the officer's decision to refuse this. Also, if there's any further amendments made in the future, could I request that it does go back to the Community Council to look at?
Thank you for that, Councillor. Mark?
Sorry, just to clarify, our officer recommendations for approval, not for refusal. Our officer recommendation is to approve, not to refuse. Yeah, this came back from a previous committee.
It's got refuse here.
Yeah, late correspondence.
That's the last one. Oh.
It's in the late correspondence.
All right, so the recommendation by officers is for approval.
Yeah, the original recommendation was to approve, and committee wanted it reported back after the last meeting. So it's committee's view that it was too big originally. Then the applicants reduced the size by a bay, but exactly as you said, Councillor Bakeborough, is to take the one bay off, which you did have a bit of a discussion about last time. So as officers, we're still happy. We think it's better. And it's whether you think that change has overcome your concerns previously or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Sorry, it's just because I'm just looking at it here and I've misread it because it's got recommendation refusal, but that was the previous one. Yeah.
That reflects members' concerns last time, and you wanted we normally back it up with a reason for refusal.
Yeah, I mean, I say I remember the discussion last time, and even with the suggestion of removing that bay, there was definitely a sense of it was still going to be too big.
Councillor Clark?
Mark, you mentioned to us on the side the other day that if we took another bay off and split the N1 in two, would that be acceptable? And I would suspect that we would be happier about that, Debbie, would we not?
My concern here is that we're looking at this in front of us, and I think with changes, I do feel uncomfortable making the decision here rather than it going through the process of going through Community Council.
You'd be happier if there was an amended plan that went back to Community Council first?
Thanks, I would prefer that, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because it does say a domestic building, but it's very large, like an agricultural building, which are two different things altogether, and it was requesting a domestic building. So do you want to comment on that, please, Mark?
Only to say I have made that suggestion to the applicants, to the applicant's agent rather, but they thought that was a step too far. So I had suggested reducing it further, take that extra bay off, but still having the three parts, if you like, the garage, the tool store, and the workshop, but by doing it in the way that Councillor Clark describes. When we spoke, they weren't minded to do that. So it might be that committee could conclude now, if you think that scheme is unacceptable, could say that. We can go back and ask the applicants one last time if they want to put the amended plan in. If they do, we'll defer it. If they don't, then we'll issue a refusal, if that's committee's decision.
Yeah, thank you. You wish to move refusal, Councillor Blakeborough?
I would move to refusal because, as you say, it's for domestic use. That's too big for domestic use. And if there's any further changes, for it to go through Community Council, because it's going to be a new application, really, isn't it?
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We keep getting ourselves into these situations. Last time around we said it's too big and asked them to make it smaller. They've made it smaller and we're asking them now to make it even smaller. How many times are we going to be going back to them? Are we either... I think we should make the decision now, and I think if Debbie's moved refusal, then if she's got a seconder, we'll see what the committee does.
Mr. Wintle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we put a condition on it that it can only be used for domestic usage? Because, it could be used for anything at the moment, the size of it. That's a concern.
Councillor Webb?
In this situation, I'd like to second Councillor Bakeborough's recommendation for refusal, please.
Right, thank you. Councillor Hayward at the back.
Can I just make a comment in regard to Councillor Harris's point of view? The problem is not that we can refuse it, is that the last time when we say we would like it smaller and we sort of hint that they can amend the application, it should have been refused last time point blank and a new application come in and we should refuse it again for it's too big. So I'm going for refusal.
I should imagine under those circumstances, if we can't agree to approve it today, it will be refused and it's up to the applicant to put in a new application. So it's been moved and seconded for refusal. A show of hands for refusal, please.
So that's 11 for refusal, Chairman.
Those for approval?
Abstention. Approval.
Right.
Applications refused, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Where's my agenda? No, we've got something else on the agenda. The last thing on the agenda today is a list of planning appeals. Who's going to present that, Paula, or not?
Not from the table, Chair, but just to make you all aware, if you weren't in earshot or there yesterday, the Hadnock Road Hotel appeal is no longer a public inquiry, it's now a public hearing, which is more a round table discussion. So it's something that we asked for in the outset, as did the applicant, so really pleased about that. It's a far more constructive environment for us to have the discussion. So just to clarify, because someone asked yesterday, just to check what our stance is, we're representing the council's position, which is to approve the scheme. That was your decision, so that's the stance we're taking with your support. We're working with the applicants.
Any likelihood as to when that's going to happen, Mark?
Yeah, May the 24th, 25th? 24th is the actual hearing.
I'm sure that Councillor Hayward will want to attend, even if he is no longer standing as a county councillor. But and you will be attending as a member of the public. Thank you very much. I expect you'll look forward to that, Councillor. Attention and today for your attendance and for all your hard work for the last 5 years. It is not in our remit to say when the next planning committee will be, as we will be in the same situation next month with a general election, and that will fall on the first Thursday in June. So we don't know whether we will have a planning committee meeting on the first Tuesday, but that is yet to be decided. But I thank you very much indeed, all of you, for your support. Thank you.
Chair, can we just echo your compliments